Hey, what's up? It is Why We Roll, as usual. I'm here with my amazing co host.
Oh, hey, what's up, gamers? It's me, Chris Pickett, alongside amazing co-host.
Wythe Marschall. And
Yeah.
we're here today with a dog. We're here with a couple dogs, actually. There's a dog you may hear in my audio. There's also a dog in our guest's audio, who's a very good lad, and you may or
There
may
might
not
also
hear.
be there might be dogs in my audio too. We're gonna find out.
Triple dog. That's lucky. That's
We
really lucky.
all
It's
we
like
all
a.
got that dog in us.
We certainly do.
We got that dog in us today, you know?
Rough
Woof,
Riders are going to
woof.
ride, and podcast
Oh,
listeners are going to listen
so true.
to
Hey,
So
big
true,
dog gotta
Bestie.
bark, you know? Woof, woof.
Eric Grunhauser, writer, comedian, nerd, boss, enthusiast, comics expert, and brand builder, perhaps, and
Wow.
podcaster.
Oh,
Many hats, many hats.
Brand builder.
Only one hat visible on the stream if you're watching the
That's
stream.
true.
Eric, you and I have been friends for a while. I asked you on the show, I think last fall, because I was
That's
thinking a
right.
lot about my creative business and essentially failures. And I was wondering about your
Okay.
new podcast, which was, I thought, amazing. And I didn't
Thank
know
you.
much about it, really. I just listened to it and thought, this is rad. I'll just call Eric and say hi. I heard your podcast, and we had a good conversation. I felt very inspired, actually. And you were talking about things you've done for money, things you've done for fun, what it means to do creative work. So I thought, even though I don't know that you've written RPGs, you've written lots of nerd stuff, and you've played lots of
Mhm.
RPGs. So I thought, fuck it, we're gonna break the rules a little. We'll have on, a writer from another genre. We've done that a
Deal
few
with
we're
it,
times.
so we're
gamers.
so bad, so bad. Oh
We're
my
naughty.
God. Our
So yeah.
our
You guys are
So
poor audience is gonna
naughty.
revolt.
before I speak gold to Maimon to use the terms of your podcast, Eric, do you want to introduce yourself for our
I
listeners? Who is Eric
Sure.
Alexander Grundhauser?
Sure. Eric Alexander Grundhauser. That's me. I think I don't know that I could do a better intro than the one you did. I think primarily I'm a writer. I consider myself a creative dilettante. I'll kind of I dance around a lot. Sometimes I make a little music, do a little illustration, things like that. But generally speaking, I am a writer. I'm also a gamer. In fact, look, just for my bona fides, these are all game books. This is
Podcast
my good
listener, it's a wall. It's a
part.
shelfie. There's a
Oh,
big
right.
ass shelfie happening.
Big
Yeah.
old shelfie.
That's
I
right.
know.
A
I've
shelfie.
got shelfie jealousy because I don't have a
Um,
bookshelf behind me like you two. I feel
well, you just
like I
moved,
got
you
all
know.
the other visual cues. I've got the glasses, I've got the facial hair, but where is the bookshelf?
In time, you know. I
Yeah.
think, yeah. So generally, writer. My most recent things published. I'm recently the author of Spider-Man for Dummies, which is exactly what it sounds like. A book all about Spider-Man, specifically for dummies, but really for anyone who's interested in catching up on Spider-Man, learning about Spider-Man, just likes reading Spider-Man stuff. I'm also the creator of, as Wythe mentioned, an audio fiction podcast. We small tangent. I do have one. It's a podcast, but it's like an audio fiction show, and I feel like the term podcast has been taken from us by I don't know, 2 to 3 white men talking.
Yeah, I
Um,
wonder.
so, anyways, it is a podcast, but it's an audio fiction podcast, so it's like fully voiced short stories with sound effects and things like that. Um,
And it
yeah,
also has
but it,
audio like bits. And I was going to ask, we can get into
uh-huh,
this, but whether our mutual friend
yeah,
Sam Tyndall, who does rock music, also did those, or whether you did those, because they're really interesting. Where you're weaving in like Trump administration voices at the end.
yeah,
And I promise
yeah,
you, listener, these are really dark. They're also funny. They're always funny and weird. They're short, but they do have this weird like. I forget the term, like music concrete, like just stitched together weirdness
sure.
from the Trump folks. That is, what's weird about it is the show is weird and the fiction's really good, and you're like, oh, that was such a bizarre story, and then you hear the Trump gobbledygook, and you're like, oh, that's just as weird. That is reality, and it's just weird. So it has a weird palate
Well,
cleansing sort of
let's
audio
let's
blitz
uh
there.
let's roll it back a little bit though. Have we said the name of the show?
Yeah.
We
So
have, yeah.
the show
Oh
is
shit.
called
Okay, well
Pressing the
I've
Flesh.
just missed it. Pressing
Well,
the
it's okay.
flash.
Show is
I'm
called
cutting
Pressing the
that.
Flesh, and it's so it started as a sort of a writing exercise as I was writing these short. So I was trying to write stories to express how I was feeling about the chaos in the world, the uncertainty, the dread, the madness that's going on all around us. Um, And, it's really hard to write fiction about a reality that is so insane. Like, I think it's why things like The Daily Show don't hit as hard as they used to, in like the Bush era, if you're of a certain vintage as I am to have watched that when it was airing. And it felt like Jon Stewart in the Bush era was speaking like truth to power in a way that was so like, like, can't believe he's saying that. But now it's good, and funny, but it's like, what do you make it's a hat on a hat, making fun of these people. So anyway, Pressing the Flesh, I think I really just tried to write these kind of funny, kind of weird, sometimes horrific stories that just try to capture a vibe of what's happening. So yeah, sometimes they're a little weird, sometimes they're funnier, sometimes they're more grim, and then I would end all of them with a song, and then just clips of actual audio from various members of the Trump administration, various horrific war criminals and other things like that, to really sell the vibe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it really works. So I think maybe that's something we can come back to, Pressing the Flesh, and how you specifically decided to branch out and do, as you said, okay, not a podcast, audio fiction cast.
You can call it a podcast. I don't know why I'm in my head about that. I just feel like anytime I'm hey guys,
that's fair.
I just started a podcast. I'm like, everyone, it's like instant, just like,
Yeah,
no, I get it. Yeah.
Whenever I meet new people and I'm like, oh yeah, I have a podcast, and you say it, yes, I know. Of course I would have a podcast. Of course.
Yeah, and again, this is not to besmirch podcasts.
Fine.
As an art form, but I think it's the new version of that old sitcom gag where someone's like, "I'm working on my screenplay,"
Yeah. Or I'm writing a novel.
I'm writing a novel, right?
Yeah.
That's the other one.
Finish that novel, it's over.
Yeah.
Or when I finish that classic car upgrade or reboot or whatever. It's like people have these tropes in culture that have evolved over time. Podcast is definitely that trope now, right? It's like, especially if you're like a middle-class white guy or look like one, it's like, oh yeah, you have a podcast. It's a niche subject. In this case, they would not be wrong. But Pressing the Flesh is a little different, so I do recommend people check it out. Regardless, because it's very cool. But we can come back to this question of like, how did you decide to do different creative projects? Because I think it is interesting that you're someone who's played a lot of games, a lot of RPGs and other games. You've written a lot of kinds of stuff professionally and for funsies. And now you've had recently these two, to me, very different, very good things come out, one of which I understand paid probably some money, and one of which, Pressing the Flesh, I take it was more of a labor of love. So I think it's almost interesting to put like Spider-Man for Dummies and then Pressing the Flesh, an insane like audio fiction podcast that is really good, side by side, as like those were things you did recently that as your friend, I saw on Instagram and was like, so that's one reason, in addition to RPGs. Of course, we want to talk about your experience with RPGs. But yeah, I don't know where we should sort of start. Maybe, I don't know, Eric, if you want to step back and think a little about writing and just how you got into like being a writer all the time and how that intersects with other nerd stuff, Yeah,
I was going to say, we can scoop this into our regular traditional question. Normally we ask people, how did you get into games? What was your first experience with it? So yeah, in the spirit of that, how did you become a creative dilettante?
Creative dilettante. So I've always wanted to be a writer. That was always my, when I graduated college many years ago, and I remember talking to my career advisor at the time. This was in 2005, and they were like, "So, what do you want to do?" And I said, I'm going to write comics. Like, I want to write comic books. And and he didn't know what to say. And he's like, cool, well, maybe you should get an internship at a newspaper. And I was like, okay, I guess. I don't, I didn't do that. Instead, I came to New York. I wanted to try to be a writer, and I instantly failed, did not become a writer, found every excuse not to become a writer while writing down little ideas. And after many years of that, I managed to build up a fairly successful nonfiction writing career, just because that's where the money was. That's where I could get paid to be a writer. That's where I could do writing. And so I wrote a lot of nonfiction, a lot for place called Atlas Obscura that, you know, was about strange and interesting places. But even there, I was trying to tell, you know, weird stories. And then at some point, you know, I kind of realized that I'd made enough excuses about not writing what I want to write. And so I just started writing. I think for a long time I'd told myself that I think somewhere in my head I'd kind of developed this idea that like if I wasn't writing for someone or I wasn't writing for something to sell, then I shouldn't be wasting my time. That it's kind of that like old idea of like, if you're good at something, you shouldn't do it for free, is the old adage, right? And I think I kind of had to break myself of that because you know, the truth is I just want to make things. I want to tell stories. I want to create like art and stories, and the waiting for them to be good enough to sell or finding the right partner to help sell them or whatever, like had just become a crutch. And so I had to get rid of it. And once I did and just started writing for no one, for myself, you know, with no expectation it would ever be read, I finally was able to develop a successful, you know, writing routine. And that led to small wins and smaller wins. And I eventually had things to talk about with other writers and editors. And then things started to come my way, like the Spider-Man for Dummies, you know, and you just say yes. But even that was still like sort of nonfiction and not really where I wanted to be headed entirely. I mean, it was a fun project and I loved it, and I would love to continue writing about comics. But I wanted to really lean into the fiction. And Pressing the Flesh came out of sort of a want to, you know, find a way to present the fiction I was writing in a new way, I guess. And, you know, I didn't really know what I was doing going into it. I knew in my head, I saw what I wanted, and it involved music and sound effects and sound editing and voice acting. I didn't know how to do any of that. So I talked to my musician friends and said, hey, come to my house and show me how to use this thing. Like an audio workstation, you know, like come to my house, show me how to use a keyboard, you know. And then I started playing around and making some of the worst, most unlistenable shit you've ever imagined in your life. And
good.
Yeah. And eventually found my way to one or two things that weren't ear destroying. And along the way, like learned audio editing and these things. And then I was able to create something like Pressing the Flesh, that really, you know, opened a lot of doors for like what I could do with my storytelling, and the different types of stories I could write. Because I think I'm just babbling here. I guess what that is to say, like, I've written enough different things that could find different homes. Like sometimes I'll write a story and I can really envision it as a good comic series, so I'll write it out as like a script. Sometimes I write things that are better, that are just more writerly, that will be better as a novel or a short story. And sometimes I write things that I feel like would be better in audio. And that's usually what makes it to Pressing the Flesh.
Yeah, I was going to ask what, I mean, you know,
It's a lot of words.
It's a lot of words, but we like your words. I forgot what I was going to ask. Right. Like, I was going to ask if there's kind of like a material reason that you chose to do it as audio, or if it's just kind of more like it felt right for that project, as opposed to making it into a comic or a series of short stories or a collection or anything like that.
I think it's a good question. I think that it started because audio felt like something I could do. I've done little bits of illustration here and there, and I am not confident. I know for a fact that I'm not confident enough in my illustration skills to have made them into like a comic on my own, because I guess that's what I'm really saying, is that it was something I wanted to be able to do on my own and have control over. And I know I would have had to find illustration partners, and I didn't want to do that for this project. I didn't know I didn't know for sure that I couldn't make music and that I couldn't make an audio thing. So I just kind of went ahead with that. And that's how they like started. And then I ended up writing for that format.
Gotcha. That's awesome. I love that. Just find out, let it lead you where it wants to go in a way.
Yeah. Also, well, like, I think like RPGs, podcasts are kind of newer in terms of like what it even is. And I feel like maybe that's one reason you get, they're also, they're a lot cheaper to make than like a blockbuster movie or something, and like in terms of length of time, a lot faster than like a novel. Probably less technical skill than like an album of music that is in a popular genre where you would know a lot about music. Although maybe AI has like changed that, but I think there's something fun about these genres where like you can do storytelling. Part of the goal is to mess with the rules, and that's kind of respected. Whereas again, I think it's harder if you're looking at the mainstream of novels, movies, even comics, right? Like to get like we were joking before we started taping about alt versions of future Gotham Batman arcs where it's like kind of solar punk and the villains just have a hard time fitting in.
Don't give it away. We Gotham Gentrified is ours. That is our project.
but I think
Gentrified Gotham is
that is GG. But I do think it's fun. What you did with Press in the Flesh, because it reminds me, like I was a big fan of Welcome to Night Vale. And it reminds me of the early seasons of that, where it's like you really didn't know what you were listening to, and it kind of was on purpose. And that show isn't as political; it's not as sharp a critique. Pressing the Flesh starts with an ICE agent debrief, and he's talking to an AI, and he's frustrated with the fucking AI, and it's hilarious and it's very sad, and it just feels like. So that's just they're all different, right? But that story just really gets you into the world of like, this is kind of the world we're living in. Maybe it's pushed a little into this kind of Black Mirror-ish direction, but you really don't know what you're going to hear. And the audio quality is good. I mean, you bring in a lot of sound effects and stuff. So it's interesting that your urge to tell stories and you're even having spent a lot of time reading books and graphic novels like led to this like what was around you that you could just pick up and do. And the podcast was sort of freeing, right? It sounds like, in that it gave you all the tools you needed pretty quickly and cheaply. And you're like, bam, 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 here's, a 20-minute really good, again, like a Welcome to Night Vale kind of moment that anyone can listen to. I can send any friend and they're going to get it. They're going to listen and be like, oh, this is dope. I get it. Right.
Yeah, that reminds me. I can tell you exactly what inspired me to make the format that I did. I've actually never, I know I'll like it. I've just never gotten around to it. With listening to Welcome to Night Vale. It sounds right up my alley. And I just have, there's a lot of media and it's hard to get through all of it. But there is a podcast. It's not a podcast because they didn't exist. They weren't called podcasts back then. It's this radio show from like 1999 called Blue Jam that ran
an old-timey
midnights on BBC Radio. And it's this comedian whose name is escaping me right now, but it was called Blue Jam. And it was this mix of like sort of songs that would then like morph into these weirdo comedy sketches that would then morph back out into songs. It was really surreal and kind of psychedelic and bizarre. And I love it. I love it to death. Highly recommend you look it up.
For
some of it
for those interested,
aged.
For those interested, the creator of Blue Jam is Chris Morris.
Chris Morris, thank you very much. Yeah. Yes. And he's gone on to do a bunch of really other interesting projects in his career as well.
Yeah, he's got really, really cool stuff.
I would recommend checking it out. It's very like late 90s feel, but it has this really organic sort of just like, I'm going to do this mix of things that I enjoy kind of feel that I really, really liked. So I would check that out. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that you mentioned like wondering if like AI could do these things. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I promise I'm going to tie this into gaming. Is I think one of the things that I find so frustrating about AI in the arts and its adoption recently is that we have never, it has never been easier in human existence to like make art from scratch, to learn a skill and to put these things together. It's never been cheaper. There's never been more of it. It's never been more like available to do these things. And it's still not enough for some. And that I find really, it feels like I don't have respect for it. I guess is the best way to put it.
I feel you.
So, but I think like this is also kind of how I feel about like tabletop gaming, is that in a lot of ways, I feel like sometimes when I play tabletop games, they are trying their best. And sometimes players seem to expect this if they're not really into tabletop a lot. They're trying their best to like make a paper version of a video game, as opposed to making like the best version of a tabletop game and like make like this thing that you can create out of your own imagination. But it takes a little bit of like that extra work. But in doing that, you end up creating an adventure that is singular to you, that is like nothing else, you know, and that is singular in the world. In a way that like playing a video game, which I love video games, and but like everyone is playing essentially the same adventure in a video game, no matter how much options you have. You know, everyone that played Baldur's Gate 3 got to the end of Baldur's Gate 3, whether or not you you know, used a barrel explosion hack or did it with like axes, right?
Or whoever you seduced.
Yeah, or whoever you seduced. But does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is kind of going back to that idea of like the podcast being an art form that's still under a lot of, you know, it's still in its infancy, and sort of the tectonic plates are still kind of moving over each other and boiling, and there's lava everywhere. It's kind of nuts because a lot of the stuff that has worked in the mainstream, I don't listen to like the mainstream, you know, hey, you're really listening to blah, 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 you know, that kind of podcast. I think a lot of people listen to news podcasts, but there's a lot of sort of weird gloopy audio in the middle that maybe it's, like you said, it's kind of coming in and out of music and comedy and, you know, different sort of news obligations to discuss things as humans and hear from different kinds of people, honestly. And I think RPGs play a similar role to your point. They allow you to have different kinds of conversations. I do agree the most boring kind is the linear goblin bashing crawl, where it really is like, you know, from point A to B to C, and that's all it is. And it could have been a video game or just a novel or kind of anything else. And the whole power is to connect people, you know, differently. No, I'm just agreeing.
I'm sure you guys have played with players who, like new players especially, who jump into a tabletop game and they play like they're in Zelda, right? Like they're like, oh, I want to go in the alchemist shop, and they're like, cool, I smash the most expensive thing and see if there's money inside it, you know? And you're like, well, okay, well, the shop owner is mad, and they're like, why would the shop owner be? You know what I mean? Like it's like this disconnect, right?
Interesting. Yeah, I've never personally experienced that running games for people.
I mean, that's a bit of an outsized thing, but like
that's
certainly,
a big fish.
It's certainly I've played with people who want to, like beginners who like don't understand that there can be consequences outside, like to their actions. You know,
you are not the main character.
Well, kind of, yeah, and that like the world in a tabletop RPG is like alive because it's being made up on the fly, right? Or operated at least on the fly, even. And there's what's the old term, murder hobos, right? That like a lot of people come into it.
Well, so to sort of level set here, Eric, can you walk us through? So I played Stillfleet with you, but what are some games you've played? How did you kind of come into the hobby? And can you tell us a little about your history with RPGs? And we'll come back to Spider Persons into the new season of Pressing the Flesh. But let's take a little journey to the table side. Let's roll some math rocks with you.
Okay, great. Math rocks. You know, I mean, I played D&D when I was a kid. A little bit, not a ton. We were like, I played a little D&D until we found out about Warhammer, and then we just wanted to mess with the minis. And then my friend group kind of didn't play much D&D after that. So I didn't really get into the storytelling aspect of it when I was a kid. I was more into like magic and what was the Wildstorm version that I can't remember now. Anyways, Magic the Gathering and ancillary version, like games like Overpower and things like that. Anyways, then I started gaming again in like 2008 or something. It was when I was in New York. I came to New York after college and found a group to play with. I started playing Call of Cthulhu was the first game I joined in with. I think Wythe may have been in that game, actually. That's
Oh my God.
We definitely played Call of Cthulhu. We were kind of passing in the night there.
Yeah. But there was that game, and that really opened the door to the storytelling possibilities, I think, for me. And that got me really interested in being able to tell these stories. So I started GMing games. And at the same time, I was starting to dip my foot in comedy and specifically like improv comedy and performing and things like that. And I found that bringing like my skills as an improviser to the GM table was really successful. And I was able to like really, it helped me build worlds on the fly, much easier than I had previously. And so I played a lot of D&D. Then I started branching out to other, went back to Cthulhu a little bit, played a little, what's that one? Seventh Age, I think it's called. Played some Pathfinder. To be honest, like I've never been much of a systems guy. Like I'm very, very into like the worlds and the lore, and the systems I can kind of take or leave. Whichever one works is kind of how I feel about it. Cause to me, it's all storytelling. That's the part that I generally focused on when I was, a GM. But my favorite thing was the making it up, and the ability to tell these stories and allow people to build these stories as they go, and really have like a reactive world. Like I always tried when I was DMing to, make sure that everything had a consequence. Little things, big things, if you accidentally burn down a shop or something like that, or like if you hurt a guard but you don't kill him, guess what, that guard's got kids, and like anything like that, if you have
gonna work, those kids are gonna starve.
Exactly. And I'm gonna make you think about that. I also was never, anyways.
This is like, just to put it in the idiom of the current indie TTRPG world, like Plus One Experience talks a lot about system doesn't matter, and sort of the things you're saying, that you can tell good stories with any system. You could just grab a system where it's roll some d6s and try to get high numbers. You can also have more. I mean, we spend a lot of time thinking about mechanical elegance and like systems that meet the narrative in some way and push it forward and play with things. So you get an unexpected result and it gives you some ideas. I also think you were talking about something, you might summarize as fail forward, like, or no boring consequences. Like no matter what you roll, there's something interesting that happens. So there is no middle roll where like, oh, I got an 11 on out of 20. Like, I guess kind of nothing changes. It's like, no. You tried to do a thing. The world is very rich and deep and complicated. Like the world is doing stuff to you, you're doing stuff to it. Let's make it fun. Whether that's, more serious, more funny. It always kind of tends to humor, which is one reason why I think comedy is, it's so fun to play with the comedy of RPGs, because it's players come in ready to just goof. So I almost found as a GM, I found a lot of fun in like being the kind of, straight man in comedy terms of just like, you're not even trying to be funny. You're letting the players kind of goof.
I have 100% found 100% of the times that the comedy that happens when at the table is like only works if everyone's taking it seriously. Like it always I'm like always frustrated when somebody comes to the table and they're like, my guy's name is Pizza Fart and his whole thing is about being stinky, like it's like, all right. Like, I guess, like, and fine, and I'll play it, and we'll play it. But, like, I think the real comedy comes when, it's just people interacting in a world, like playing that straight man, like you're saying.
Well, sorry. Now I'm just thinking about the pizza
Yeah,
fart
just
as like a one
pizza
page,
fart.
like the tales of the picaresque tales of Sir Pizza Fart.
Oh no, it's grimdark, man. It's the most,
It's
the most
grimdark. The
it's the most
grimdark
brutal story you've ever fucking heard. He lost his whole family in an intergalactic war. He's like, he was in a pogrom. Like, oh my god.
Oh, it's like meta barons. Yeah, it's like playing with sort of genre there.
Sorry,
The dog agrees.
We're keeping him
Brief
in.
intermission for dog.
Sorry,
Eric, no, you're good. I'm sure, Chris, you might have. My thought is to kind of bring in spider people into this and talk about maybe some of these tropes, right? The tropes of you're GMing, you love storytelling, you're watching movies, writing scripts, doing comedy, thinking about all these ways to tell stories. I know you're big into comics.
Yeah.
To me, one of the big intersections with RPGs is this kind of reduction to archetype, where like in a novel or a movie, to me, you'd want to do the opposite, and it's all about the realism, but with in terms of the psychology of the character, But when you're in an RPG, you kind of do trade in these quick tropes, and you have to be careful to do it skillfully and kind of unexpectedly and play with people. But I think comics, have really been they've spent a lot more time in some ways than RPGs on this. So I'm curious how you sort of got into, I guess, like comics and being I don't know if you think of yourself this way, but like a comic expert, to the point where at some point people are like Googling, like, who knows a lot about spider people, spider hyphen capital, S capital P. And they're like, this guy,
yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. I used to think of why am I always on this big other conversation? I used to think of myself as much more of a comics expert until Iron Man came out. I went through a very real, very emotional journey from being like the comic book guy when I was like in high school and college, like, because they just weren't as popular as they are today. And it was like an art form that I felt like was mine a little, because I was like trying to fight for this art form. And then when Iron Man came out and the MCU hit, and really comics, which I'm just using as shorthand for when sort of nerd culture really exploded and became for everybody, I had to have this very weird internal sort of like come to Jesus moment about like this thing that was quote unquote mine is now everybody's, right? And so like that's a fun side note. So calling myself a comic book expert, yeah, it's sure, but there are probably people that know more than me. Even when I was writing Spider-Man for Dummies, everybody would say like, are you the guy that knows the most? And I'm like, in some ways, like I probably don't know issue numbers like everyone else does. I'm bad at that, but I can tell you about the whys and the hows of the storytelling much better than most, and so so to your point about like archetypes, I think the thing is that they both forms tend to deal in, and this is a wide generalization, but I think the superhero genre tends to deal in like myth making, like you'll often hear when you watch people, or if you read about people that talk about like, say, the difference between like Marvel and DC. You'll often hear DC be described as like their characters are gods and they're myths, and then the characters at Marvel are like your sort of human heroes, or not human heroes, but your more down to earth heroes. The world outside your window is the term that Marvel uses. But in both examples, like you're talking about these larger than life, fables that are being told. In superhero comics, by and large, every problem, no matter how complicated, comes down to getting punched. Like you can punch it away for the most part.
I mean, that's how Captain America defeated Hitler.
Yeah, and how he'll do it again too.
And he'll do it again.
Yeah, and again, I know this is a broad generalization because in my head I'm screaming at myself, being like, not all of them end with fights. but a lot of it ends with fights, and a lot of like this, the way that traditional superhero storyteller is structured is in this, you can take a very complicated problem and push it through the lens of someone who can punch it. Whether that is, Spider-Man, who is able to, punch Dr. Octopus, who is an example of like what his genius could have done to him if it had gone bad, or I'm trying to think of another more direct example, but something like that. But anyways, it really distills things into that. And I think that is exactly what gaming does, right? Like at the end of the day, again, broad generalization, but in a great deal of tabletop gaming, it comes down to a fight, no matter how complicated the conflict might be. There are, unless it is explicitly built to not encourage battle, like most systems end in a fight. And so I think that there is like a lot of sort of thematic crossover there.
Well, and the tension, right? You're also pointing out the tension in both comics and RPGs between every single story being, however cool the gloss and the setting, the lore, ultimately it's a very simple archetype where two people are punching each other at the end or lasering each other, whatever. And then the other tension is like, oh wait, but actually it's very deep, and the lore is just kind of a way to get into these much more complex stories. And I remember as a kid reading Transmetropolitan and The Authority and these comics that blew my mind, where I was like, wait, comics can do this? So, I think that's a tension in comics. It's definitely a tension in RPGs because, people like fighting, but you don't want to only simulate fighting, or else that's all your game can do. And how often do you really fight stuff in the real, whatever.
But
so
I think you're also like in both scenarios, like really what you're doing is trying to like make a myth, and you're trying to distill some very complex feelings and motivations and actions into very simple beats.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. And whether it's a myth about tech or whatever. Yeah, sorry, Chris. Go ahead.
I was just going to add on to that. We also shouldn't underestimate the raw pleasure of power fantasy at the same time. Sure. Like, it feels good to watch Captain America punch Hitler in the face. It feels good to watch Spider-Man beat a tech billionaire with octopus arms or what the fuck ever. And it feels good to punch the big evil guy at the end of your campaign, and there's like an agency there that you don't have in real life. And I think that that's a very powerful lever,
Totally.
Right, and it's how do you use it, right? I mean, if power fantasy is kind of for nothing, then it's repeating the problem of eventually it's this almost fascistic thing of kratocracy, right? The rule of strength. Whereas if you are using it to tell stories where the oppressed overcome their oppressors, then it's a different thing. If it's about vengeance, it's Kill Bill. If it's about there's so many other archetypes that aren't just literally we killed every goblin because we could. So I think it's interesting that is really as you're saying, like this dynamic that is really at the heart of at least mainstream comics, at least the ones I'm not a comic book expert, but I've read some comics, and a lot of them are kind of about this problem.
I think if your power fantasy is to use that power to oppress others, then that's a problem with you.
Yeah,
like I can't think
to be punched in the neck.
Like a lot. I think most of the power fantasies we're talking about generally have as fraught as they can be, and altruistic, a more like punching up, if you will, sort of.
Not punching down, always punching up for sure.
And also like but that's the problem with D&D, right? Like you play D&D with kids and they do that. They're like, okay, we're going to kill every single we're going to kill everyone who looks at us funny. We're going to murder random people. And you're just like, whoa, why are you so evil? And it's because they've never done the agential part of the power fantasy. And so it's letting them, it's letting their id kind of play, and you can kind of rein them back and show them cool stuff. And a lot of them aren't into that. But so again, not to paint with a broad brush, but like, I think there's a part of each of us that has that impulse of like, oh, you're letting me do this. Okay, I'll do this.
Sure.
And so I think, that again, you can see the appeal in comics, but so why Spider-Man? So Spider-Man is very different, and I take it from Spider-Man for Dummies, just even the back of the book copy, really, actually, I think does a pretty good job saying, hey, Spider-Man is kind of dope and different than a lot of these other power fantasy assholes. But Eric, you would know best.
Sure.
Why Spider-Man? What's so great about him?
Why Spider-Man?
Why
not Batman?
Why not Batman?
Just Superman.
I mean,
well, I'm thinking of the web series Spider-Man and Batman.
Why Spider-Man? So I think the thing about Spider-Man is that he was one of the first heroes. So you have like the golden age of comics, right? Where you get Superman and all these muscled up, brawny superheroes. That is the dawn of superheroes, and they're big and they're strong and they help the weak, and they are indestructible in many ways. And that's what people think they like about them. And so then Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, that whole Steve Ditko, all the Marvel Comics originals, they come in and they start making heroes who are flawed, and who, like, as opposed to their defining feature being that they are not flawed, that they are indestructible, paragons of good, they are introducing the exact opposite. And the Fantastic Four came out. That was really their first foray into that. But then Spider-Man was very specifically a unique character in that he was a kid. Most superheroes up to that point were like all adults. Any kids were sidekicks. He was flawed. He was angry. He was picked on. He was
a nerd.
Yeah, he was a nerd. Midtown High's #1 wallflower.
That's right.
and when he got powers, he didn't become a great guy. Like, when he got powers, he became a dick, and like went on TV and really tried just to make it all about himself, and to the cost of Uncle Ben, famously. And that's what it took him to really see that he, needed to rethink what heroism meant, So I think Spider-Man is really unique in that, like, he was one of the first heroes, if not the first, to really ask readers of this genre to interrogate what does it mean to be a hero, as opposed to just like, this is a hero, look at that person getting robbed, like what essentially like that being a hero is a cop. Or
it's a one-time commitment, because I think I've always found that weird about Batman is that his parents get murked in front of him and he's like, a child will spend the rest of my life murdering not murdering, but like beating within an inch of their life and then locking up in an insane asylum anyone who I think might be kind of bad. And like, if that, again, most kids grow out of that. That's like healthy to like maybe have that thought when you see somebody yell at your mom in the store and you're like, that's mean. But like, it's different to be like, no, this is my life now for literally the rest of your life. Spider-Man, to your point, I mean, and I'm thinking of all the reboots and, Miles Morales and all the versions. It's like different youths, different generations of I'll say American kids grappling with very real problems of like, wait, what if I got all the cool tech and I didn't have to worry about money and the girls liked me? And then you're like, oh, as you said, it's like instantly, I'm a dick. Oh no, I'm a terrible person. I have to like work through this.
I think that's the other thing too, is that like historically he's, with a few exceptions, like he's never gotten the money. He has always gotten the girls, even though he has often played as this like, I'm terrible with the ladies. He's always dating some beautiful woman. But that's
the most beautiful woman on the planet.
A different. But in general, he is presented as like as a nerd. He's unsuccessful. He's always worried about rent. It's one of his core features.
And he's always worried about his family.
One of my favorite things.
So these are very real things that are like more interesting character development. And for RPG players, I mean, again, it's better storytelling to have characters have families and have to worry about rent to some degree, even if they get to be powerful. So I think a lot of that complexity has always come through in all the versions of Spider-Man, a little bit more obviously, again, to me, at least the naive watcher or reader, than some of the other stories where like with Superman or something, it's just, it's God, right? He's God, whatever,
Well, I mean, even like we can even talk about Superman. Like the best Superman stories are like it's all about flaws, which I think a lot of RPGs have gotten so much better at in the past 5 to 10 years. I mean, I can't think of a system that doesn't ask you to write flaws into your character nowadays, right? but that's really what it's all about, because whether it's Spider-Man worrying about rent and being like kind of like bad at juggling his various commitments or whatever, or even if it's Superman, if his flaws are that he's disconnected from his humanity, or that he is, unable to love Lois the way he wants to, or whatever, or, or that he fails in some way. It's these flaws that make heroes interesting. And when it comes to like gaming, this is something that somebody, a friend I used to game with, once told me about building characters that I've followed ever since, which is that you should always choose only one or two things that they're good at. Like, never make a balanced character. Like, choose one or two things that they're good at and shove everything that you have into like those stats. And you'll be like, well, make them dumb. And it's like, great, fascinating.
Good.
Like, like, exactly. Or like, well, they're super smart, but what if, where there's going to be combat, they can't fight? Well, figure it out, like that's what's fascinating. That's what leads to more interesting character choice. And I've always encouraged my players, whenever I roll a character nowadays, it's like maybe even just one thing that they're good at, because then it forces me to interact or create a story that is like memorable, that is like, if the one thing my guy's good at is like flipping coins, he's going to find a way to make flipping coins like the thing that like this battle hinges on, like,
You do the thing where he shoots the coin over his elbow.
God, I wish I could do that.
It's easy to learn. It's easy to learn. I taught myself one year when I was really bored. So if I can, you can do it.
Thank you. I like that. I like that attitude.
I was going to say though, like I really like what you said, with Spider-Man, with some of the more interesting superhero stories where it is about questioning, like, what does it mean to be a hero? And to your point about more contemporary or more recent TTRPGs, kind of encouraging people to incorporate flaws. Like, I think some of the best systems, the best games that I've played also do the same thing without ever really explicitly putting it out there, but it's just like, oh no, your character has to be complicated. What does it mean to be an adventurer? What does it mean to be the character in this story, or the hero of a story? Are you really a hero at all? I think like Knave by Ben Milton does a good job of that, where like from the first sentence is like, you're not a hero, you're a piece of shit, you're whatever. I like that.
Yeah, or if you look at the classes in Merkborg, for example, you're a fallen noble, or you're literally a deserter from the army. So it's not that you're the soldier or you're like the Duke. It's like you're the Duke's weird cousin who has a disease, or you're, you're the guy who ran away after stealing this art, And I think there's a lot in a narrative structure. So Merkborg tells you the world is ending. It's sort of morality's gone out the window. I don't, I'm a communist. I think it's good to be moral and have morals, but it's cool at least that takes D&D and flips that on its head. So you're not a hero. You're running away from things. You're stealing things. And then you get games with narrative structures like Orbital Blues, where you're working through kind of personal trauma while doing gig jobs and exploring kind of, space prole culture. You have games like Stillfleet, right? Where you're like, the company is the bad guy. So no matter how powerful you are, you're still up against it and you sort of have to resist. I think that idea of building in a narrative structure that allows for these interesting min-maxed characters is really important. Because I do think you can have games where if everything, if you're, made of hammers, if you shoot hammers out of your mouth, everything looks like a nail. And it's hard if a game just doesn't like reward that as a player. It's not satisfying. Like I remember, Chris, when we played Troika and I got the claviger, the key guy. And so my thing is I can open any door, but it never mattered. Everyone was like, it doesn't matter. And so I was like, well, then why am I the key guy?
Like, why am I here? What am I doing?
So I do think
to your point with Troika too, when I got just the guy with a big stick and it was like, well, I'm just going to beat the shit out of everything because that's what this is telling me to play. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Can I bring this? This reminds me of something that I think, if I'm going to bring that conversation back into comics, one of my favorite comics, which is One Piece, and what you were talking about, like a guy, like, okay, my thing is just like, I have keys, right? Or like I can open any lock, right? And you're like, well, there's no doors, so that it doesn't mean anything. But I'm like, no. Like, what about, like, what else can you unlock? Can you unlock someone's like head, their secrets, their like things?
Exactly.
This is completely right, Eric. I should clarify. This is not a Troika problem. This was the GM problem, right? This was every time I try to make a suggestion, it's like, oh, you want me to play a very straight character, but you also had me roll randomly, so it's like, okay, what am I going to do that? But I agree with you. I agree with everything you're saying. I think the best stories do come out of kind of real flaws and really interesting powers and there is a level of randomness of mixing those things together, but then all the people need to be receptive. Ideally, it's your friends and you're goofing off, and that does tend to happen where the goof troop is like, yeah, man, you opened up my heart. But also there's kind of more interesting levels of cinematic discovery where it's like, oh wow, this is really just it always sort of happens this way with good improv, right? It's like the exact right thing is presented, and you're like, I have a key for that. So I should say I'm not hating on Troika so much as pointing out that like
makers of Troika. We're not hating on your game.
They should come on the show. They're very nice.
Nelsonian is super like you. You're all sweethearts. You make great adventures.
Yeah.
But I think like as a player, when you're thinking about your character, that being good at one thing, I think One Piece is a good example of how that can mean anything, right? Because there's always this, I think it's probably the way he writes it, where he's just like, I'm going to have a guy do a thing. And they're like, well, how do they do it? And he's like, and then has to think of this like backwards way where it's like, actually they had this fruit, which allows them to do X, Y, and Z. Right. So like, if it's like the guy who had the door fruit, right? Which was like, could open any doors. Oh, but also in people and also open doors in air. Okay. There's like, you can really turn any power into anything if you really try.
Yeah. I mean, Doflamingo from One Piece for our One Piece nerds in the audience. Doflamingo is a great example. The string fruit, lame. No, it's fucking awesome. He can slice you in half. He can control you like a puppet. He can pull strings. It's awesome. It's so good. Yeah, no, Oda does a good job
of 1,000 examples
creatively writing those kind of like one beat characters and making them way more interesting.
Totally. And having a world that's kind of instantly identifiable and weird, but also has enough touchstones and familiarity. So again, there's a lot of good TTRPG design in good. And again, I think about, whether it's MCU and DC or other, edgier American comics, the same thing. It's like whether it's manga, comics, whatever. It's like if you have a good story and cool lore and good character design, I mean, these are universal tropes. And so there's definitely a lot of kind of back and forth. It's actually interesting. We haven't done a kind of comic book episode before, I think. We usually tend to probably just make fun of like kind of, the sort of Superman style tropes of just like unkillable, heroes and villains. But I do think there's a lot of depth to of course, contemporary good comic writing.
I'm also a Superman defender, by the way.
No, you should be. I mean, and also he rose out of, again, that certain World War II milieu. I mean, it's it's like Jewish artists thinking of like ways to punch Hitler's head off over and over again, which that's a job. That was a whole industry that we should bring back. America invented that.
He's a difficult character to write well, but not an impossible one. And I think only like the laziest writers don't think like Superman, like, if he's invincible, what do you do? And it's like, all you can think to do is punch the guy.
Right. Well, I always go back to Dr. Manhattan and the idea of distraction and distracting someone even briefly, that, the butterfly wing that then gives rise to sort of social chaos. And that's like an interesting way to tell a story. I do want to be mindful of time and bring it back. So we've talked about some of the things you're interested in. You spend a lot of time thinking about. Brings us back to something new in addition to Spider-Man for Dummies. So if you're interested in Spider-Man, there is a funny, well-written new Dummies guide by Eric Grundhauser. But the other thing you did is last year put out Pressing the Flesh, and I hear you have a season 2 in the works. So I don't know if you want to bring any of this thoughts about tropes and storytelling and how do you write short stories? Any of that.
Yeah. So I think, so there is season 2 of Pressing the Flesh will be out, let's say in June, all things going well. And I think this, with this season, I was able to, I think, identify, because the first season was so much just experimentation and just wanted to get it out there. And, as imperfect as it may have been. And I think I really was able to focus a little more on what I wanted the entire vibe of the show to be. Because while the stories aren't necessarily connected, they all kind of exist in a world where like the worst people win. It's not, I do write a lot of things about like, a lot of my stories that I write tend to have a lot of hope and like want and desire for like change in them. I think Pressing the Flesh is a bit of my doomer, my most creative doomer stuff coming out. And so it's, using that sort of like overblown archetypical caricatures of crypto bros and MAGA people and politicians and whoever, to just like present a world like where if all these terrible things that they say and want, like, what if they get them? Like, what, okay, all these terrible things that you think you want in the world, taking people's rights away, militarized streets, and rampant racism and fear and all these things. Okay, so you got them. So what does that look like, and what does that make you look like?
Yeah, well said. It
is a blast.
It's so fun. It's reminding me. I saw an interview with I'm probably going to say his last name incorrectly. Eric Kripke, something like that. He's the showrunner of The Boys. Yeah. And he was commenting on the AI Trump Jesus photo that he posted on Truth Social, and then you
mean the doctor photo?
Yeah, the doctor photo. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, no, I meant the doctor photo. My bad. But like the day before. What am I trying to say? That AI photo got dropped on Truth Social the day before an episode about Homelander literally becoming God in The Boys came out.
Yeah.
So in the interview, he's like, I just like, there's no parody anymore. There's no parody. Like it's just happening in real life. I think much to your point about the Daily Show earlier and all, just bringing that back around.
Paul Virilio wrote about acceleration, and I think this is something that people have been predicting, and we've been talking about. The Daily Show examples come up. I feel like we were talking about this when it first changed over and Jon Stewart came on board, that but it definitely keeps accelerating, and that's kind of how that works. Like you really feel it in moments when things are changing faster and faster and faster. And I think people have predicted this for a while, but with generative AI, I would say in the last year has really brought it home for millions of American workers and just normal people just looking on the internet that like, oh, now we've crossed some sort of horizon. And that again is why are we doing a show about TTRPGs? Well, in part, random happens to, we played these games as kids, but also because they are actually harder. Like the fact they're about humans having to get together, match schedules, meet each other, learn how to like get along or adjudicate rules, not talk over each other. I mean, there's real reasons to like do RPGs, not to shit on reading comics or anything else, but just to bring it back to the
space for all of it.
Yeah, there definitely is. So, I definitely think, the bad vibe horizon, as Vex says, has been sort of crossed. And it is interesting.
Bad vibe Rubicon.
All that said, I think that's when, so Eric, I will say, there's a little plug. I was a little afraid of listening to Pressing the Flesh for that reason, the doomerism, because it felt like, this is something, I know you're a good writer, I'm going to like it, but also like, it's going to be a downer. And then I weirdly found it wasn't, the tone was just right, where it really wasn't too icky. It was kind of very dark, but much sort of weirder in a way that I like, that allowed me to just like consume all of it rapidly. Whereas I feel like, The Boys almost is like too like it's too just like, oh man, that's what Trump wants, right? Like Trump imagines himself as Homelander. Fuck that. It's a good show. It's really well written and acted, but also like, okay, I don't want to watch this guy's fantasies. I
came here for my escapism, not his.
I think the fact like the ice, I don't want to spoil it, but the fact it starts with an ICE agent who's yelling at a robot and like gets in, it's like, it's funny. You know what I mean? It's like, we've all kind of been there. I've never been an ICE agent, but I've yelled at the robots,
Yeah. And I don't think that in that episode, I didn't want it to come across as though like the ICE agent is particularly sympathetic either.
Right.
I think part of what I was trying to get at, and what I always try and get at, and there's a few ICE agents in this new season. They're such despicable targets. But they, that I really try and press home is that they can be human and unsympathetic. Because I think that sometimes when we talk about that ICE agents in particular, and many sort of aspects of modern, like, I don't know, political humanity, if that makes sense. Anyways, you get into this binary of they're either the most evil people on the planet, or hey, they're humans too, we need to be sympathetic to them. And I think that both can be true.
It turns out if you study the arc of history, people can be really great and they can be huge pieces of shit that you don't need to sympathize with at the same time. Like I'm just agreeing, really.
Well, you have to be able to do the materialist analysis,
Right.
but also that doesn't mean that you become a robotic. You're not Dr. Manhattan, right? Like you're a human, and there are there are also opportunities to eventually see these contradictions play out in such a way that those ICE agents leave those jobs because
Right.
Maimon consumes them, or which would be great. We're not necessarily seeing that en masse, but like, you know,
we have to wait until they get deployed to the fields of Gehenna, and then Maimon will come from the ground. And,
well, let's see what season 2.
Low a black horse.
It's tough, but yes, I appreciate. I'm glad that the tone comes off like that. That's generally what I want, and I also like to the point you make about the boys. Like, and I like the boys, but I think when writing it, something I run into a lot actually is how like how gross do I want it to be? And when I say gross, I don't mean like kind of sick gross, like gory gross. I'm fine with, because it's just kind of interesting and gross, but like, you know, like there's real evils that are happening to real people right now, you know, and I do tend to pull back a little from emulating those too vividly in my episodes.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Not to look away from them or anything, but because like it feels a little icky to be making play of them in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, there's a certain point where like you have to question whether or not it's exploitation of people's real circumstances, real material realities. And does my material give it that does it give it the proper, is it capable of having that conversation at that level? I'm not sure at all of this.
Well, and I'll say this is very similar to RPGs. You can write an RPG that gets really realistic about like doing La Revolution or something, but also it's like, is that what the RPGs are good for? Will that be a fun experience with your friends at the table, again, whether it's Discord, whatever, or strangers at a con or whatever? Like, you know, is that the best use of your time? Or you know, at some point it's like, what are these hobbies, what are these art forms good for? And I do think Pressing the Flesh, to your point about it really isn't a podcast in that sense. It's audio fiction. Like there are other podcasts like this, or other audio dramas like this, but it's something where it's a one-way, you know, short, sweet story. And I think, to your point, what can you as a writer do, and what can you as someone interested in music and, you know, audio editing and kind of messing with sound do in 20 minutes to kind of spook someone, mess with them a little? And I think as writers of RPGs, we also have to have that same question. Okay, it also, like, we were having this conversation the other day, attention spans have shrunk, and so you no longer have 6 hours with players, you have 2 hours. So it's like you got to meet people where they are. It's like, all right, well, I only got 2 hours usually, so like, what can we do now, you know, and not in 1995 or something? It's like, we don't live in 1995. Like, the world has fucking changed, man. So
are people not playing for 6 hours nowadays?
Only the groggiest of grognards still have that attention span, you know.
The old heads definitely do at cons. You see them, but a lot of folks don't. So I'm going to stop asking questions and such. Chris, do you have any final substantive questions for Eric before we turn it over to Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I think my substantive question for Eric is, I'm just kind of curious in terms of, like, you know, going into writing for audio drama. What does your process look like as you're gearing up, getting your voice actors ready, getting pen to paper? What does it look like to write specifically for audio as opposed to for Spider-Man for Dummies or for TTRPG or whatever?
I think so. Writing for audio is, for me at least, and this is just the way that I've found that works best. Like a lot of my work, like when I do comic writing or writing for something like Spider-Man for Dummies, I do a lot of outlining and a lot of like scene blocking. Or some version of that, right? When I write for Pressing the Flesh, when I write specifically for Pressing the Flesh, like, you know, I don't do that as much. I tend to just sit down and put pen to paper and have a conversation with myself or with the characters, because of the format. It's generally, there's some action, things happen, but like it's generally about people talking, you know, or sound, right? So it's like a conversation. So for me, the difference is like I can much easier sit down and just like type out a conversation and then go back and edit it and actually often find out what it was actually about and make it work sort of in reverse. But I think one of the big unlocks for that for me that I got stuck in for a long time was I was so concerned about format. I was so worried about like, am I gonna write this in a way that like any voice actors I work with are gonna say like, I don't understand this, or like, or even worse, this looks like the work of an amateur. And which I am in that regard.
No. Dilettante.
Yes,
not amateur.
dilettante.
It's different. It's different.
Correct. And once I got over that and was just like, you know what, we get it. I stopped even attempting to put it into script format. It's written on a Word doc with like name and dialogue and then some action. That worked, like once I, I had to get out of my own way, and just let it happen. And realize that is like not what was important in how I was writing that, yeah, that was the difference. And I think to bring that to gaming, like I remember when I used to DM games, I used to be nuts about sitting down. I would come with hand-drawn maps, multiple story threads. Look, I'm not going to say I didn't make some cool stuff. I did. And I would say 75% of it never got used.
Yeah.
And which is a very common thing. But when I realized that I could get out of my own way with that, like the players had more fun and they could do more of what they wanted to do, as opposed to me being like, saying I'm giving them agency, but really not, being like, oh, you can go talk to this guy, but he's going to say the same thing any other guy they talk to is, that sort of thing. Just like allowing myself to not be so in my head about what everyone else thinks. I think is what really helps.
Yeah, that's a big hurdle to overcome.
Yeah.
I also vibe with that. Like it was really fun that era when I would always like have hand drawn everything all the time. And I don't think it was like a misstep per se to like explore that world. It was just two completely different things, because at the table it doesn't matter. And I kind of knew that even as a lot of what became Stillfleet was like hand drawn notebook stuff. But I think just knowing your art and knowing like like you said, you don't have to outline or write a certain way. You don't have to use the same software. You can kind of mix things up. New project, change the brief, change the outcome, right? You can always kind of just cut things up a different way because you want to learn a new skill, because you want to streamline your own process. And you can always go back and do more hand-drawn maps later. I think that's a good place to end it. We've kind of touched on a few different things just to summarize. So, writing in general, comic books, and doing sort of audio and moving into sort of audio fiction. Eric, maybe we can have you back on and play a game at some point. I think you'd be fun to stream a game with.
I love playing games.
Maybe we need to write a grit system superhero power fantasy game for the game jam. Maybe,
I wonder if Hodak would draw some superheroes for us too.
I wonder if there's somebody on this podcast right now who would like to contribute to the game jam with a.
Yeah, I don't know what pressure, that is, but I'm happy to join, I guess. Well, there is that Marvel did release famously. They've got a current system going. I've never played it, so I don't know if it's good. I think I tried. It felt very crunchy.
The old one, the older version, I've not looked at any of the newer stuff, but the Marvel superheroes from like the 80s or whatever, it is wildly crunchy. It's got a lot of tables, man.
They all tend to be crunchy. There's an interesting one called Rotted Capes that's about a zombie apocalypse that happens in the Marvel like universe, and so there's a bunch of A-listers who are zombies, and you are a like D-lister working, and you're trying to just survive. Okay. But it is wild crunchy. It is kind of interesting. There's a lot of mechanical. There's a lot of mechanicalization of like we're talking about kind of flawed people. So just throwing it out there because they're in their now second edition very recently. I'll hand it over, Chris, the final question, but just to sort of plug, we are going to do a game jam. So by the time this comes out, it may be live as a podcast. But if you're watching the stream, it's not quite live yet, but will be very soon. And it's our first game jam with just the whole system. So licenses for all the games. You can make commercial stuff, free stuff, whatever you want. But we're trying to just get people to check out the system. So again, Eric, no pressure, but maybe at some point later we'll play either a game for our system or a different system.
I'd love to. I'm down to play any system. And before we go, one thing. So just so I don't get too many people in the comments, I'm not out here trying to besmirch systems or game systems by saying I'm a story guy. I think there is room for everything.
You heard it here first. Eric Grundhauser is a story games only.
No!
He hates adventure games. He hates traditional math.
Doesn't like adventure.
Shit, hold on. I need to write something in a notes app and post it online really quick.
Well, with that, Chris, do you want to ask our traditional final question?
I would love to, as always. Eric, where can folks find you on the internet? Where can we buy your shit? Where can we support you and keep your creative dilettante practice up and running?
Thank you. The best place to find me online is on Instagram, Eric Alexander Grundhauser. And you can buy Spider-Man for Dummies wherever books are sold. I would recommend bookshop.org. Find a local bookstore near you that carries the Dummies line and buy it up. And yeah, check out Pressing the Flesh. It's on most all streaming platforms, not Spotify, because but you can check it out on Apple Music, which is also, but at least I need one of the big ones. So, no one is free under capitalism.
That's true.
Yeah, so check out. So all of that said, go to Apple Music and check out Apple Podcasts, because it's a separate app. No one knows why. And check out Pressing the Flesh. Is where I'm going with that.
Excellent. Eric, thanks so much for joining us. Any last words you want to impart before we close it down for tonight?
No, just thanks so much for having me. This was so much fun. I'm down to play a game. Let me know.
Anytime.
No, thanks for joining us. This was awesome. Nice to take a little break from all these TTRPG nerds. No offense to our audience.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
No, thank you so much, Bean and Vex in the chat. Anybody else who's watching? And thanks to anyone listening to the podcast later. Say good night to everyone. Why we roll. Thank you, Eric Grundhauser.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Why we roll. Eric Grundhauser.
That's
Bye.
Me. Bye.